you, Barbara. Is it okay if I stand right next to the penis symbol? Hi. I am overwhelmed with gratitude to be able to be here in this room with you all, and to Betty most of all. I'm Carol Queen. I flew in from San Francisco yesterday. We had a storm, and now here we are, about to have another storm. And I was asked to tell you how I met Betty. I met Betty because one of my instructors at the Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in 1988, when I was just there as a baby, said, "You're interested in masturbation. You want to know Betty Dodson." And she gave me her phone number, and I cold called her, and she said, "Come on up, hon." And that was 33 years ago, and I think the rest is history. Some of you probably have similar stories, or Lord knows where you met Betty. I hope we find out more about that as we go along this evening. She opened her door, her arms, her life, her point of view, for sure, to me. And Betty became sort of a touchstone for me. I brought my partner Robert to see her immediately when I got him, of course. And when we later started the Center for Sex and Culture in San Francisco, we did it because sitting around one day in the mid-90s in Betty's apartment, talking about this and that, I think it might have been the same day we coined the term homosexual. We didn't coin it, but we defined it differently. No, absexual. That's where we were talking about. Betty turned to us and said, "You kids should start a place." Well, us kids had a lot on our plates already, but you know what? Betty was right. And I think that Betty was able to see into the potential of people. And I know that she did that for me. She always gave me support, and not unconditional support either. She gave me feedback. She thought I needed it. There was that one time I was going to be in Mariana Beck's movie, and I got my hair done to look all excellent. And I came back with tendrils, and Betty came at me with a scissor and cut them right off. So that means Betty was the closest thing to a mother that I've had as an adult, although I think you could probably also say the same thing. I don't know. Betty was more than a mentor to me, but she certainly was that. She was the example of someone who did it her own way, always. I mean, look at this artwork. And I remember her telling me that when she was being lionized in the 60s and the art scene and this and that, but then when she started doing solo women masturbating, boom, she was out of the galleries. That's not what we're here to look at. We're not looking at love anymore. And she was always a little pissed off about that, I think, and so am I, and so perhaps are some of you. My last memory of Betty in public, I have other memories in private, dishing and talking and drinking wine and covering the waterfront with our opinions. My last memory of her in public was at the Catalyst Con, a wonderful little sex con that Dee Dennis created back in the early aughts, whatever. More than 10 years ago, I think. And Betty had been invited to keynote the Catalyst Con. And Betty was busy telling her story. She'd already written version 1 of her autobiography. She would zhuzh it up and do it again soon. And she was telling the story basically of the sexual revolution. I don't know if you call it that. But what happened in the 60s around sexuality revolutionized Betty. There's no question about it. And she started to make art, make relationships, make connections, make waves in ways that I don't imagine that beautiful woman in the 1950s would have figured out how to do. Something about what was catalyzing the culture catalyzed Betty so much, so hard, so beautifully, that she never let it go. And when she said so, I mean, she was outraging these young bloggers at this conference. They were like, I saw Betty Dodson grab someone's ass. I'm like, punk, you would be lucky if Betty Dodson grabbed your ass. I know that's not how we roll now. I know that, and that's good, but you'd be lucky if Betty Dodson grabbed your ass. It's just all I'm saying. And when she brought up something about somebody and a dog, oh my goodness alive, tweets went wild. Betty was too sexual revolution for this world in some ways. And without her there holding that together, showing me that you could make the kind of life they never imagined us to be able to make. I don't know if the Center for Sex and Culture would have been there. I don't know if Betty inspired Del Williams and Joni Blank to make sex toy stores. I kind of think it's all down to Betty, you all. It's kind of what I think. And I also, before I stop, I just want to greet you all from Samantha Miller, who met Betty very close to the same time that I did. And Betty's namesake, Sam's son, Dodson, is living in Portland and is very proud of his name. Thanks, everyone.
To tell you the truth, you know, if Betty were here, I can be in the light. Yeah, but the point is that you should be, right? That we should all be seeing each other. We should be in some kind of a circle. There should be flowers. I mean, this is like giving an effing lecture, which I've done too often in my life. But not for the last year and a half, so I don't even remember how you do this. Okay. So I'm here to talk about Betty's opportunities in the world of academia that I and a number of others of you facilitate. So I have all these props. I have to put them down because it's just too complicated. I'm sorry. Okay. So I want to make 3 points. I want to start just by saying, you know, Betty was really an artist. Fundamentally, she had the character of an artist. And iconoclast, I'm just going to do it. I don't care if anybody likes it. I don't care if anybody buys it. I don't know where it's going to go. I need to do it, and I'm going to do it. And academics, you know, don't exactly welcome iconoclasts. This is not exactly what we're all about. Outrageous characters. I mean, that's not too comfortable in committee meetings, decisions and budgets and things. But the interesting thing about Betty, the artist, the outrageous iconoclastic character, was that her topic was sex. I mean, it could have been anything, right? Artists have topics, whatever they are, but her topic was sex. And academics wanted to know about sex and didn't know very much and don't know very much and probably never will know very much because it's not the kind of a thing that you can know about in the way that academics know about things, which was the way that Betty knew about it. So we wanted her knowledge. We wanted her experience. We wanted her spirit and her soul. And of course, it came with this unbelievable package of this outrageous personality. So I started this group of women sexuality academics in 1979. I was at Downstate Medical Center. I was the one. There was one at Beth Israel, and there was one at Rutgers, and there was one at Stony Brook, and there was one at New York Hospital. And you know, we were like really isolated in those days. We got together. We had this conscious raising group. So I started this in '79. We met monthly for a while. We met in restaurants. We met in offices, and then at a certain point, I met Betty and invited her to join this group, or possibly she met me and demanded to meet the other people. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but it was around 1986, 87, she begins to appear in the photographs of this otherwise quite, ordinary, stable group of academics. And she brought a quality of irreverence that was helpful, that was disruptive, but really that was helpful. And I think we all appreciated her so much, and I think she felt appreciated. And as I got to know her, I could see that Betty really had managed to straddle so many different domains, and was accepted in them all and just was herself in them all. And I really appreciated that. And I just want to say, that her pamphlet, her book, The Immortal Liberating Masturbation from 1975, my copy, my signature is in here. It looks like the signature of a 5-year-old. This was a very, very well-known book in the field. It really transformed the field. And, so you talk about a text that made a huge difference in academia. Liberating Masturbation was it. And many years later, when I got to be more of an activist and working on, challenging the medical model of genital cosmetic surgery and so on, I used, with her permission, her drawings for the poster of this exhibit. I'm not sure you can see that we had in Brooklyn at a gallery, and we gave her an award. I mean, the whole thing is like silly. It's like play money. I mean, it's trying to master sexuality, trying to make a difference in the culture. But we did the best we could. Okay, so that was one thing. The second thing I want to say briefly, much more briefly, is you remember in 1988, we had this goddess elevation event for her. How many of you were there? At least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So this was, so Betty attended a fundraiser for the National Coalition Against Censorship. She was the National Coalition Against Censorship. So we were having this fundraiser in the Rubin Museum on the West Side. And so we're wandering around the Rubin Museum and we see this, painting, drawing of some kind of, Buddhist amazing thing. And it's all about goddess elevation. And it turns out that Betty really relates to this. And I think, well, let's have one for her. I mean, if anyone ever deserved a goddess elevation event, it's Betty. And so was it you, Judy? And I remember somebody got us the Friars Club. Yes. And so we had a luncheon at the Friars Club. And, we sat in a U-shaped table and we all said what we're all saying today, except she was there, which would make me cry. We all said, you're special, you're unique, our lives are better for you, the world is better for you. And if that isn't what a goddess is, it's not clear what is. Okay, so then the third thing I want to say is about the bench. So Veronica, who's just a tremendous organizer and leader and really should get a round of applause for this. We would not have the bench were it not for me. So and I were just talking about how much we miss Betty and crying, what are we going to do? And this is ridiculous. And she died during COVID and there's nothing and it's heartbreaking. And so we decide to have something, or Veronica decides to have something. And I decide to get something. And so what can we do? We can't give her like we can't endow a professorship, right? Because she's not connected to a school. And, what can we do? Where can we immortalize her? This was a big problem. And so the best that we could come up with really was a bench in the park. The park just right outside this museum, just down the block from where she used to live. Eric says that she used to walk in the park, and like those who can visualize it, So it just seemed like to raise $10,000 to put a small plaque in perpetuity on the bench would not be impossible. It turns out it's a piece of cake. It took 3 weeks, and I thank you all so much for contributing. And we will have the plaque in December, and when it's put on the bench, we'll have another event. And the idea is that things should go on, that we didn't want it to stop here, even though this was going to be a swell event, and we were all going to be happy. We were all going to prioritize that and talk about how much we missed Betty and what a great contribution to the universe she was. But I hate goodbyes, you know, and so we wanted it to go on. So we'll have this bench. It's number 30 on the map. Veronica and I walked around, and that was the bench that spoke to us. And so looking forward to seeing you all on the bench.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So great to see you in person, and what a great exhibit this is. I think somebody said, well, the exhibit is a little small, but I think it's just absolutely fabulous. First time I saw it tonight. So I'm Walter Bogtin. I'm a professor at Columbia University, and I'm the co-director of the Division of Gender, Sexuality and Health in the Department of Psychiatry. So this is the place that Anke Ehrhardt, who was part of that group of academics that Leonard talked about, established. And Anke is still with us, but she passed the baton on to me and Bob Remian. It's the home of the HIV Center, the LGBT program. And wouldn't it be nice for us to have an endowed Betty Dodson chair in a few years? What I'm saying is that we've always had a focus on women's sexuality, especially on women and HIV, and we'd like to really renew that and rebuild that focus. And I just I'm thrilled to be here tonight and to be in this impressive lineup of all these revolutionaries. But let me tell you a little bit about the impact of Betty on our work within academia. So I met Betty in the early 90s, must have been at a meeting of the Society for the Scientific Study of Sexuality. And at the end of that decade, we decided in Madison, Wisconsin, to organize a 3-day conference totally devoted to the topic of masturbation. And of course, Betty was on the top of the list. It was our keynote, and we had just really a marvelous meeting. And that then resulted in a book that is called Masturbation as a means of achieving sexual health. However, Betty was not always complimentary about the academy. She would say, all talk, you know, at best mental masturbation, but no action. But I need to tell you that Betty had a profound impact on the way we teach sex today, whether that's be to medical students, nursing students, residents, physicians, and also our patients. The first principle that we teach is that sexual pleasure is essential, if not the most important part of sexual health. And second, that hands-on stimulation is the key. So sex therapy nowadays starts with physical exploration, albeit at home. It's still homework, not in the office. But maybe we'll get there someday. Well, there is the whole sex coaching movement that is helping us with that after all. And I think that starting with that intimacy and physical touch really serves as a trust builder, you know, for oneself, relationship with our own body, but also I think in relationships. So I think the old approach was really couples first have to sort out their problems, a lot of talk therapy, and once we're all happy with one another, then we'll go to what happens in the bedroom, you know, or somewhere else in the protocol. But that has really changed. We now start from the beginning with that sexual intimacy, and then oftentimes the conflict that people have just disappears like, you know, snow for the sunshine. Throughout the years, I visited Becky many times in her apartment together here with my dear friend Becky. And I remember many discussions about No, not the vagina, but rather the vulva and the clitoris. And yes, just this last week, you know, and it says in the program, Betty is a world-changing party girl, I think. Last week, I was remotely part of a dissertation committee in Oslo at the psychology department of the university there. And the PhD candidate showed a drawing of a man and a woman, nude, and the man's body was carefully detailed, the phallus, the glans, the scrotum, and with the woman's body, it only said pubic hair and nothing else. So Betty's spirit hit me. I confronted him, and we discussed the implications, you know, of that kind of imagery that still prevails. So I think, as Leonor said, we need to go on, and we need to together continue that very important work of Betty. So I'll turn it over to Becky, my partner in crime, in all the adventures that we had on her table that would go up and down depending on what we needed, and on the floor. And so I'm turning it over to Betty, who's of course the author of The Clitoral Truth, about pleasure, orgasm, female ejaculation, and a whole lot more. Becky.
Thanks, Walter. When I was editing A New View of a Woman's Body with Carol Downer for the Feminist Women's Health Centers in 1978, to 1980, yes, it took that long. Betty's book, Liberating Masturbation, originally self-published in 1972, was on the bookshelf above the desk where I worked. The book became an underground bestseller and was later reissued by Crown as Sex for One, The Joy of Self-Loving. Betty has always been not merely ahead of the curve, but a leader in creating and defining feminine sexuality activism over her long, productive life. And over that life, the continuing need for which was starkly illustrated when she got Gwyneth Paltrow to admit on film that she didn't know the difference between the vulva and the vagina. Not that one needs to know that to have passable, good, even stimulating sex, but knowledge, as they say, is power. It is brutally unfortunate that to this day, however, Gwyneth is not the only woman or girl or man who exist in this heartbreaking state of sexual illiteracy. And I'll note that Betty was just as interested in the needs, interests, and challenges of men as she was as those of women. Referencing liberating masturbation in his masterwork, Solitary Sex, A Cultural History of Masturbation, historian Thomas LaCour quotes Betty. Masturbation is our primary sexual life. Everything we do beyond it is simply how we choose to socialize our sex life. Thanks to her long and brilliantly fruitful collaboration with Carlin Ross, Betty's legacy is secure, and thanks to Carlin, it will continue to flourish. Her website is global. I enjoyed many dinners with Betty at her apartment, often including Walter, among others. Upon arriving at the door would be cracked. I'd remove my shoes and walk into her office bedroom where she was predictably at her workstation, answering question after question about sex from random individuals to seeking answers to thorny questions or uncertainties about sexuality. This morning, a Google search for Betty Dodson turned up 2,020,000 hits.
Whoa.
Now that's a shining testament to her rich and enduring legacy. Mazel tov, our Betty.
Oh, my goddess, Betty Dodson, Aunt Betty, Uncle Betty. I'll get to that. I met Betty probably, I would say about 30 years ago. At that point, I was publishing Libido magazine. For those of you who remember that very quaint magazine some years ago. I look at it now and it just seems like some 7th grade desktop publishing
No.
endeavor.
I still have issues.
Oh, well. So I'm going to start with, not when I met Betty 30 years ago, but about 15 years ago when we got to know each other really well. And I would decamp to 121 Madison Avenue for my New York fix. And then she'd say, well, I gotta get the hell out of New York City. You got this place in Wisconsin, can I come? I went, it's Wisconsin, but sure, come on. Beautiful summer place. So she wanted to get out of New York in August, which she did. And I know Wisconsin, for many of you, it's a flyover state. I can tell you that people do masturbate in Wisconsin. They don't talk about it very much. But Betty took to it like a cowgirl from Kansas. It was very familiar to her. And what I think she most loved was that it was pure, unadulterated anonymity. She would say to me over and over, and she spent several summers with me, she'd say, oh, I don't have to be a bisexual, lesbian grandmother of masturbation until I get back to New York. But Betty couldn't help herself. She would go bar hopping with my then 20-year-old something son, some 20 years ago now. And I was thinking, what the hell did they talk about? I mean, he knew of Betty, but I'm thinking now they're going out drinking together. So I said to her one morning, Betty, I gotta ask you, I mean, what do you talk about? She snapped. She said, none of your business. And then she said, well, you need to know. We talk about penis size and dating. He needs an uncle, and that's what uncles do. So she officially became Uncle Betty. I, of course, was not allowed to call her Uncle Betty. I made that mistake once. She said, you can't call me Uncle Betty. Only the kid can call me Uncle Betty. Okay. But Uncle Betty couldn't help herself because there was the one summer I was dating a man who I eventually married. It did happen. And I was off fixing dinner, and she said, I'm gonna check him out. I'm like, oh, great, I don't want to see this. So I find this out later. She began to interview him. And the opening salvo was, are you solvent? And apparently he answered the question in the affirmative. And she was just warming up then. She said, have you had any sexually transmitted diseases? And he apparently answered that one in some fashion. She proved it. And then she said, any mental illness in your family? And I find this out the next day and I am completely horrified. But apparently he passed muster and Uncle Betty approved and eventually we got married. So it must have had something to do with the tribal council and Uncle Betty. So Betty and her art, we all know about her art, but did you know she was also a clothing designer? So we went off to a conference in Reykjavik. I think it was maybe the last time she was a keynote speaker. This would have been 2015, I think. And she wanted me to go along. Carlin was having a baby, and I said, sure, I'll be happy to go. So she said, well, what am I gonna wear? She said, I need to be remembered. I said, don't worry, you're gonna be remembered. But then I find out that she had made a friend of mine in Wisconsin who was a clothing designer, and she'd sent him drawings of vulvas. And the next thing I know, this jacket arrives. So if you'll hang on to this, I have to do a quick switch here. It's reversible. Oh. Signed by Betty. You don't need Chanel. You don't need Alexander McQueen. You just have to have a Betty Waldo vest. So she made quite a hit, and it really happened before she was the keynote speaker. she was being interviewed by this very nice, quiet young man from some journal in Reykjavik who asked her, how did she feel about all the work that she'd done with women? And she kind of became the unfiltered Betty, as we know about, but that can happen. And she said, well, first of all, women rule the world. And you guys ought to step back where you belong, because you're just fucking up the place. Oh, there's a soundbite. In any event, that was what Betty was all about. And, you know, those of us who were lucky enough to get to know her, we've never really been the same again, because in the end, Betty took no prisoners. Thank you. Okay, that's enough. This was the more muted version. It was just pocket.
That was a great entrance and a great reveal, I gotta tell you.
It's funny, I had lunch today with a former student of mine, and she said, oh, you know, Betty's having a service tonight, are you coming? And I said, no, I was just breathing hard. Do I really have to stand in front of this? It's like a sexual weather report. You got a warm front coming in this way. Little low trim in my coat. So the story that I would like to share with you, and I met Betty years ago in the mid-90s. I was a fitness model back at the time when I had 2 lungs. And Betty came up to me one day and she said, I would love for you to be in one of my circle groups that we're going to film of men. And I thought, oh, that sounds exciting, not knowing what it was. Then when she explained it to me, I said, can we step that back a little bit? I do have a profession in public health and elsewhere. And so I became a friend of hers, and she became a mentor of mine right up until almost the very end. But one day I was doing a walk and talk in Central Park with my clients. And when I dismissed them and let them go, and I was starting to do my charting, or maybe I was doing notes for grand rounds or something, I called my phone, and I realized she'd been calling my phone for the past hour, like 15, 20 times. So I called her in her office, and she whispered into the phone, there are people in my house. There are people in my house. I said, Betty, lock the door and call 911. Don't call me. She said, no, I invited them here. I said, I don't understand. She said, get your ass down here right away. Hopped in a taxi, headed down to 12B. I go inside, and there's this entire British film crew there doing a documentary on her. And what she didn't like was that there was an entire living room full of crew, but then there were also people in the bedroom. So she felt a little overwhelmed. And of course, when I came in, people were touching her little glass objects and everything else that did not sit well with her. So I got everybody and said, you know what, there's a coffee shop downstairs. Why don't we clear out, y'all can go down for coffee. I'm just gonna talk to Betty for a little bit. So the director and producer, they invited me back into the back room, and they're asking Betty questions. And the mind-blowing part for me, we know Betty is the artist, we know her as the champion, we know her as this wonderful friend of ours, mentor, mother, uncle, was Betty was spouting off quotes from Magnus Hirschfeld. She was spouting off quotes from Havelock Ellis. She was giving my first mentor, my first job was with Bill Masters and Jenny Johnson. She was quoting Bill and Jenny. She was quoting all these people. And during a makeup break, the director stepped back to me and he said, is this all true? Is she really just taking the piss out of us? And I said, I've been following every word she has said. Everything she has said is true. And things that I did not know, I checked on my little BlackBerry, they were also true. So I said to this wonderful BBC producer, I said, you know, Betty is not one to take the piss out of you. She might want to piss on you, but she's not here to take the piss out. And it blew me away because my dear friend and mentor, this artist, this wonderful feminist champion, not only was the fun-loving person we knew, she had the knowledge that so many people outside of this room didn't think that she had. So it is such an honor for me to be in this space, surrounded by her artwork, and so many of you. I think of Carol and Robert, who I got to meet in her living room, of Mark and all these others here, just that she lives in all of us, and we live through her. So may we all live in peace, and may peace live in all of us.
Oh, I'll stand in front of this. I thought I could go like this.
And then for those on Zoom, I want to do that all night. So first of all, it's really great to be here. I live in Los Angeles, and so you know the story. I saw the list of everybody that was going to be here and the event and everything. I'm like, I've got to be there. So I tap into Google Flights, and what do I find? A flight, including $16 to pick my seat from LAX to Newark, round trip JetBlue for $150. So I'm like, I'm there. That's it. There you go. So it's really great to be here. So my Christmas with Daddy. Let's see, on holidays, I would drive to my family's home at the Jersey Shore from my hometown in Boston, where I lived for many years. My brother's family was surrounded by children, and the last place I wanted to be with was with several screaming kids on the morning of December 25th. I had suggested to Betty that I would have much more fun staying at her place on that special holiday. She readily agreed and to what would become a Christmas ritual of brunch at her favorite restaurant. Yeah. Yes, that Neville Chester's threw a small gathering for Betty and I, Michele Capozzi, and some heavily tattooed guy who was a New York City cop who wanted to break into the porn business to get laid. Neville tried to steer him away from that career choice since he would so easily be identified while he was working some chick in a movie. There was booze aplenty and joints were passed around. Betty was a little tired and went home, leaving me as the Virgin Mary with three not so wise men. So needless to say, Santa delivered on my gang present that night. Anyway, back to Betty. The next day, the next day we celebrated the holiday at, of course, Leal, and I continued my journey to family in the shore later in the day. After Betty was blessed with meeting Eric, which was an endless topic that we loved to chat about, he also spent Christmas Eve one time when I was there. On that Christmas morning, once we were all awake and still a little groggy from perhaps too much champagne the night before, Betty came over to my black fabric futon. Remember those? Yes, her guests actually slept on them too. And boasted that Eric's Christmas wish was for a three-way. So I'm like kind of waking up and going, oh, okay, like sure, when? Betty then proceeded to unveil Eric's throbbing boner under his bathrobe. So like I always say, no better time than the present. It was a real Christmas present for sure. So needless to say, it was yet another Christmas wish granted by none other than our dear Betty. I know she'll be looking over us and blessing all of our 60 Christmas wishes for the rest of our lives.
Hi, everyone. My name is Camilla. Some of you might know me as Selena Fire. I met Betty when Michele Capozzi kept inviting me repeatedly whenever I would run into him at Stinnekink or wherever else to his boat at the boat basin on 79th Street Boat Basin. So one day it was the Folsom Street East, if you remember those things. And I was there by myself, and it was a beautiful night, and the sun was just beginning to set. And I just said to myself, I mean, why should I? I'm just going to go over there. You know, he had no phone. You just have to show up. So I show up, and who's there but Betty and Veronica, not to be confused with the Archie characters. And of course, I had heard of them. And I was very excited and happy to meet them. And we had dinner at the restaurant that was right there. And that began a friendship with Veronica, but also a connection to Betty. I also happen to have the same birthday as Betty, which I'm very proud of. So I hope that means something great in the universe. But anyway, so I just loved and admired her. And I was there at that time, at that conference when Betty was so outrageous and all of the little bloggers and other young people who were there were freaking out, and I was laughing my ass off. But that was an amazing moment. So over the years, we stayed in touch, and by the time that this show, by the time that I connected with Betty about this show, she really didn't have anything to do with this museum anymore. So I was here because I had a number of items in a show here at the Museum of Sex called Punk Lust. So I'm part of the group of the proto-punk people who hung out at CBGB's and all that. So I had some items there, and I was working with this curator named Lissa Rivera. So I knew Lissa. So we had the show, and that went on for a year. And I talked to Lissa, and I said, "Do you know Betty Dodson lives just down the street from you? You really have to see her stuff. She's an artist. She's an amazing artist. You really should have a show." And at that time, they had this Lenora Feeney show here, which was incredible. So I told Lissa, "You have to meet Betty Dodson, and you have to come over and see her work." So Lissa Rivera and two assistants of her and I came over, and I brought them over to meet Betty, and the rest is history. So that's what happened. I'm very proud of that. I was determined that before she died, when she was starting to get ill, I felt very much also this idea that she had to have a show before she wasn't around to even know about it. And she did. And I feel like I did play a part in that. And I just feel like she's this amazing goddess, an amazing teacher, and fearless person in terms of expressing sexuality and being fully herself, unafraid. And I aspire to that. I think I have a little of that in me. I hope we all have a little of that in us. It's a fight. It's a rocky road. She got some shit for it. But we've got to really be out there saying what female sexuality really is in all of its permutations. And so Betty, thank you for this. I hope this is the beginning of a lot more exhibits, and I would like to personally work toward having a bigger show and an art museum. And if anybody wants to join me in that effort, I want to get this word out to those curators so that we can continue to celebrate her, not just as a sex educator and an amazing leader in the sexuality movement, but as a really extraordinary artist.
Let's take a breath. Without question, and Betty has said this, so I'm really quoting her, the wisest decision Betty Dodson made in the last 15 years of her life was to partner with Carlin Ross. Not only did Carlin take personal care or make sure personal care was taken of Betty, but with Carlin, with her energy and her expertise, Betty was able to consciously direct her legacy. What you're seeing here today is one of those bits and pieces. She knew this was going to happen, and she knew she was probably not going to be here to see it. Also, following around directions, also, one of the other most important things those two did together, of all the many things they have done, is create, finally, after years of us begging her, create a certification program for other Bodysex instructors. Now, when you create something and it's very specifically in a model and your kick-ass style and your shock jock approach to sex ed is your trademark, it's very hard to pass that on because they can't be you. So as Betty got older, she realized in some way that it was all going to change anyway. She was going to let go of it anyway. She could do it her way and with some control, and you can imagine the appeal of that. So she started Bodysex certification in 2017, and then again in 2019. There was a gathering, there were gatherings of this international community at Menla in upstate New York, at the Buddhist Center. And Betty got a chance to have all her Bodysex practitioners in one place. By the time we got to her 90th birthday, I'll backtrack for a moment. Carlin, I was absolutely overcome and thrilled that Carlin asked me to join them. She asked me to send something, but she said, I just want you there for Betty. And Betty and I had many amazing conversations, but what my role I felt really was is she could look at something and then she could later that day have a glass of wine and then tell me the truth about how she felt about dying, about these women, about her work, and about where she was at that point in her life, which was really quite happy and quite settled and quite ready to go. Interesting that we were at a Buddhist center, huh? But, okay. The image I remember and will always remember as I tried to grow into the kick-ass sexual old age Betty Dodson did is standing in the middle of this beautiful room at Menla. This was Betty not standing, not me. Nude, with her vibrator in her hand, but she turned it off. And she was standing in the center of a 60-woman erotic recess, the largest that had ever happened. And she was just looking at them in wonder, you know, with this little smile. And the orgasm was about that experience. She didn't need the vibrator for that one. Now, one of the exceptional people who was in that room that day is named Laura Bogus. She's one of, I don't know how many certified Bodysex instructors now. And I asked her if she would share her feelings about carrying on Betty's legacy, and this is what she wrote. Betty Dodson wasn't my friend, but I was her student even before I knew she was my teacher. When I was a teenager, I looked at my vulva with a mirror after my mother's persistent encouragement. It was the mid-1970s, and my mother probably had read an article written by Betty. Later in the 1980s, my boyfriend facilitated my first vibrator orgasm using the Hitachi magic wand, another sign of Betty's influence. It was in the early 90s when I was formally introduced to the work of Betty Dodson. I purchased her Ode to Self-Pleasure, Sex for One, after finding it on the shelf in the self-help section of the Borders bookstore. Yeah, I consumed Betty's book eagerly, probably while taking numerous masturbation breaks. Her message about the importance of self-pleasure and self-love had a profound impact on me. Over the years, I'd go back and read portions of Sex for One whenever I had a romantic breakup or just needed to refocus on my relationship with myself. About 25 years after purchasing Betty's book, I found myself at a crossroads in my life. I was looking for something new that would challenge me personally and motivate a direction for my third act after retiring from my career as a first grade teacher. Of course, I was still interested in sex, so I was very excited to come across DodsonandRoss.com. My heart jumped when I saw that Betty was still doing workshops in her Manhattan apartment, just as described in Sex for One. Hang on. After watching Betty and Carlin's YouTube videos and reading Betty's website articles, I was energized. With a mix of apprehension and anticipation, everybody remember that one? I signed up for my first Bodysex workshop. May 2016, I was 57, Betty was 87. I wanted to learn from her how to grow into my next 30 years alive with sexual energy and passion. I wanted to put to rest the years of shame that I'd felt in my plus-sized body. I wanted to feel sexually liberated and free. That first Bodysex circle was the catalyst for my tremendous personal growth and change since. The women in that first circle were all incredible. The support and unconditional love that I felt was profound. I soaked up all of the wisdom that Betty had to share. I was so impressed by Betty's complete self-acceptance and comfort in her own skin. I wanted that too. So I continued to immerse myself in Bodysex practices. I took a second certification workshop with Carlin and Betty just 5 months later. I started to facilitate my own Bodysex circles in 2017. Now, finding women to take their clothes off and masturbate isn't easy in Cleveland, Ohio. But I truly believe in the power of Betty's work, so I persist. I know that women's lives are changing for the better through Bodysex because my life is so much better because of Betty Dodson. I am free to explore my sexual desires. I have a more informed masturbation practice, and I tell my partners what I want. Pleasure has healed my body shame and past trauma. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I have evolved into truly loving myself. I am deeply grateful that I was able to spend time with Betty in workshops as well as in our 2 Bodysex retreats. I'll always remember an image of Betty at her 90th birthday retreat, standing like a general outside of the sweat lodge. She gave each nude, of course, just so you get the proper picture. She doesn't mention that, but I remember. She gave each one of us a soulful hug as we progressed in line to go inside the lodge for the Native American sweat ceremony. It was as if she was passing the torch to us. I'm proud to be a member of Betty's Orgasmic Army, as she calls us. I'm a certified Bodysex facilitator. My third act is support other women in their journeys of finding inner truth, self-pleasure, and self-love. Betty may have left the planet, but there is still work to be done. I'll spend the rest of my life carrying forward her legacy. There are many others like me in our global Bodysex sisterhood, each of us with our own stories of evolution. Betty Dodson and Bodysex will never be forgotten. Laura Bogush, Bodysex Cleveland, bodysexcleveland.com.
Hi again, I'm Veronica Vera. I always forget to introduce myself, but and you know, I didn't want to be reading. This is actually one of my favorites because, you know, I was raised as a Catholic girl, so this one is one of my favorites. Another one is Betty's portrait of her mom, you know, and I'm blown away by the fact that she got her mom to pose naked, and I think it tells a lot about both Betty and her mom, so I wish that one was in the show. I didn't want to be reading from the page, but since I told everyone, oh, you know, don't blab too long, so I thought, well, I better read. So I met Betty in the 1980s, and at that time I was already a porn star and researching sex as a sex journalist. So I really thought like I knew everything about sex and my body. And I thought like, well, I'll take this Bodysex workshop because, you know, like I've heard about it. And I, you know, I knew about Betty, but I had never taken the workshop. And I really, you know, I really learned a lot in that workshop. It was very healing for me. You know, I'd grown up in the 50s, like a lot of people, a lot of women who, and, you know, we weren't allowed to touch ourselves. I was like very proud when I touched myself for the first time. I thought I'd found this wonderful spot and I, you know, but then I got punished for it. Betty referred to my vulva. She said, oh, that's your black orchid, you know, it's like, and she helped me see that, you know, even taking my clothes off in porn and really, it was really about my wanting to see my genitalia, my wanting to see my body, not so much showing it off to other people, me wanting to see it for myself. And Betty helped me to see it for myself. And that was tremendously healing. On the program that you got today, Betty, Saint Betty, that was my doing. So I grew up with this idea of saints, of course, and now my spiritual home is Judson Church. And that's a church dedicated to social justice and the arts. And so at Judson, they have this grouping called the Queer Saints. And they have saints like St. James Baldwin and St. Audre Lorde and St. Oscar Wilde, and people we don't think of as saints, but people who inspire us. So these are the queer saints. And I thought, no, Betty has to be in this pantheon. So I spoke to the people at Judson and to the artist who's making these saints, Jason, and I had him make up the Saint Betty for us tonight. And it's not only for us tonight, because the Judson Queer Saints, they get carried on banners in the pride parades, and they get placed in the sanctuary. So the Saint Betty banner will be carried in pride parades from now on. And and I think about the idea of saints that I grew up with. Saints were either like really goodies and cloistered and always leading, perfect saintly, clean lives. And the only way they touched themselves, saints, was usually if they were whipping themselves, and making themselves suffer to get closer to God. But Saint Betty encourages us to diddle ourselves and achieve heaven through pleasure. So, so Betty is a saint in my eyes, and that's the saint I want to follow. And so, but, if she lived in another time, and even at that time, Betty's teachings are blasphemous. Betty would be a witch. Betty would have been burned at the stake. But she is a witch of enormous power, and she has bewitched us with her teachings about the power of pleasure. And I know that, that I'm a better person because of knowing Betty. And I know we all feel that way. This is a time of year when it's called, we're getting near Samhain. So a bunch of us, we called ourselves the Gangola, and we used to meet at Betty's apartment, the Temple of the Goddess, and at different times during the year, usually around March we would meet, because a lot of the people in Gangola celebrated birthdays in March, and we'd also meet at this time. And the Gangola was Amy Rosemary, who's here, and her husband Ken, and Barbara and Kate Bordenstein, and Candida Royale, and Michele Capozzi, who's been mentioned, Vanessa Del Rio, and her man Vito Petito. And I think that's it. I think I've mentioned everyone. Maybe I should look at my page so I don't forget everyone. So at Samhain, we celebrated birthdays. Candace's was October 15th, and mine was coming up November 1st. So we also wrote on pieces of paper what we wanted to let go of for the coming year at Samhain time. And we also talked about what we wanted to support in ourselves. And we put things with the letting go things in a cauldron, and we let them burn up. So that was all part of, letting go of the old and welcoming the new. But what Betty gave us, it's never going to grow old. And Betty will always be modern, and Betty will always be new. So, see, it went blank. My page went blank. I'm going to just breathe with me while I just get to this page and see what else. Oh, there it goes. Red fixes everybody, right, Barbara? Yeah, well, I did want to also raise up our hearts to Candida Royale too. Well, I guess I really didn't forget anything. Because now I'm just down to the part where it says, Saint Betty, amen. And which Betty? So mote it be.
Betty was a closet ritualist, also a closet tantrika, and a closet many, many, many things that she didn't want she didn't want to like ruin her whole tough ass image. But she loved Samhain rituals. She loved the letting go. She loved the imagining what's next. So here's Betty's Samhain ritual for you. What would you like to, what did Betty help you let go of? You can shout it out if you want. You don't have to, you can say it silently. What did Betty help you let go of? Put it in the flame.
Fear.
Shame.
Guilt.
Shyness. Inhibition. Imposter syndrome. Come on, people.
Relying on others.
Yeah.
Being a
Anybody?
goody goody.
Yeah. Say again.
Being a goody goody.
Yeah. Anybody else? Come on, this is your chance to burn it up. Betty? Yeah.
Be politically correct.
Ho.
Editing myself.
Yes. Okay. Okay, as we approach Samhain, which is New Year's Eve, anything left in the ground on Samhain is Hecate's in the morning. It's all gone. Now, it's a little early for rebirth of the light, but as one thing dies, another is born. And part of our Samhain ritual was in the dark is when your new idea, your unmanifested self gets to rest and form itself. It's that thing that exists the minute you think it. And a little down the line will start appearing in real life. So this is welcoming in that bit that's gonna sleep underground. What do you want? What did Betty give you that you want more of? What did Betty give you that you want to give others? What do you want to carry forward that is your gift from Betty Dodson? Shout it out or say it silently. Fearlessness.
Power.
Body positivity in old age.
Truth. Fun.
Yes.
Our history. Our history.
Come on, what did Betty?
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Attitude.
Power.
Pride.
Art.
Generosity.
Laughter. Availability.
Badassery.
Hospitality.
Making family.
Yeah. And so to all Betty's family gathered here tonight, and to all Betty's family gathered here on Zoom, Betty will light our way. Oh, we are complete. Oh.